So talking about my failures, my first thought is, well, how much time you got? Because I got a lot of them. But in all seriousness, I would probably categorize my failures since they're too numerous to list. And I would say they're of certain types, right? There's failure to make money with a doing, right? To end up having to chalk something up to practice and say, well, I didn't really have a lot to show for it other than, lessons learned or experience, right? But is that really a failure? What do they say? They say, good judgment comes from experience and experience comes from bad judgment. So is that failure or is that just school? Frankly, all of the failures that I've had, I've ended up chalking up to experiences in education. So at this point, that entire category of failures, I don't consider a failure. Different type of failure, maybe letting other people down. And I've done that a lot. But ultimately, I've had to reach a point where it says, if I'm being true to myself and I fall short of the expectations of others, was that a failure or was that just a boundary? In other words, if I'm gonna go out and do it my way and be true to myself and hold my standards and my ethics and my values and deliver my value the way that I speak and I articulate to my customer, and it's all in alignment with who I am, and somebody else doesn't like it or somebody else says I'm letting them down or I'm falling short of their expectation, then for me, that's an opportunity to check in with self and say, am I gonna hold this boundary or am I gonna compromise? Am I gonna be out of integrity, out of wholeness to fit better with the expectations of others? And in that case, if I have to choose failing myself versus failing others, and it truly is a binary, obviously I seek win-win and I'd like to, say yes to both expectations of self and expectations of others. But you can be damn sure if I have to choose, I'm gonna choose expectations of self. And so in that case, I now discard that entire category of failures. I mean, when you develop the right relationship with failure, I think eventually you get to where it means something entirely different and they all sort of go away, where ultimately the only true failure is a failure of self, a failure of truth, a failure of being who I say I am, or allowing myself to operate in environments where in order to maintain homeostasis in that environment, I have to compromise who I am. And I end up living this divided life where I'm one person here and one person there and one person there. And I go to work, I turn certain things off for myself. I come home with my family, I turn other things off for myself. And maybe I serve in my community, I turn other things off for myself. That's exhausting, having to live this fast switching life where I'm turning these traits on and these traits off. That sounds like failure. That sounds like failure of a life. I basically chalk it up at this point is my failure is anything that went wrong from which I learned no lesson and thus repeated, maybe. It's actually easy to not fail. You just develop the right relationship with failure.